Let's look at slide out of battery as it pertains to the handgun. Right here, slide out of battery, as you can see. So one of the first things that I do is once the gun's up on target, gun won't fire, I bring the gun back to about a 45-degree angle. From here, I don't see any brass because I'm checking rear to slide and the chamber area. Once I don't see any brass, I'm gonna seat the back of the slide with the fist, with the meaty portion of the fist. I'm not gonna palm heel it and cut my hand. There's no need for that. I have more power right here with the fist, and there's more meat there in order to seat that. Now that's just one way in order to do it, is go directly for seating of the slide. And sometimes you have to force it back into battery. Sometimes based on the amount of dirt and everything else that's going into the gun, the environment that you're in, you might have choppers around you, you might have ran and dove into a dirty, sandy environment, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. But the slide, sometimes when we tap and rack, it may still go into an out of battery position. Now, that's the other way we solve it. So once I'm up on target, gun won't fire. We can solve it also by tap, rack, and of course, recharging the gun and getting the gun back up. So a couple different takes on something as simple as slide out of battery. So something for you to consider. The next subject matter that we're going to talk about is malfunctions, specifically failure to feed, failure to fire. Now let's break down failure to feed, failure to fire. What I see statistically over class after class after class, we're talking 20 students and generally about 40,000 rounds that are fired, very rarely do we have someone end up having an issue of a light firing pin strike. But what I can tell you is in that class, we have a tremendous amount of failure to feeds. It is my personal opinion that the failure to feed is a result of operator error. Meaning somewhere along the line, you screwed up, you didn't do what you should be doing, whether it started with your admin load or whether you manipulated your gun, did a tack reload, or you started clearing a malfunction and then of course in that process didn't make sure that your magazine's seated. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna break down both in these episodes, pistol and rifle procedures for fixing this particular malfunction, and then I'm going to go through a whole series of malfunctions later on as well in other videos. So the first one being the most common, failure to feed, failure to fire. How do we fix it? So with the pistol, that procedure is once my gun's up on target and I get that click, I bring the gun in, tap, rack, and then of course I fire. In the law enforcement community, we're looking at tap, rack, reevaluate. The reality is I'm talking through it and you saw how fast I'm doing it. You're talking about an officer who is in the middle of an engagement, their gun goes click. That tap and rack, if the guy ends up throwing the gun out of his hands, he's probably still getting shot. The reality is that if we're IDing these malfunctions very quickly, then they should be handled and conducted very quickly as well. Something to note is hand placement. It's one of the reasons why when I speed reload, I'm not a big fan of the slingshot method. I want to get in here and get a good palm on the side of the gun. Fingers, generally it's going to be about 4 fingers on the side of the gun right in here. And then from there, I'm going to be able to cycle this gun. I want to be able to do it in one full stroke. So if I come in, I tap the magazine, I rack the gun, I'm back up with a good firing grip. So the way in which you grab this slide is very, very important as well. You want to get as much traction on the gun as possible when doing these types of clearances. Let's talk about the load sequence on the M4, and here's why I bring it up. From the very beginning, our behaviors are very important. So when we look at techniques in loading the gun from an administrative point of view to doing a tactical reload to failure to feed, failure to fire, to also malfunctions where we eventually got to load the gun again, what I'm going to cover next, which has been taught for a very long time, will help aid you in lessening your chances of ended up having an issue with failure to feed, failure to fire. A couple things to understand. Whenever we start to mess around with this gun and insert magazines, it's always much easier to insert a magazine with the bolt lock back to the rear. Now I'm feeding on the right-hand side, but I also need a little bit of compression here. And that's later on when we start getting into the tack reload, which is why I covered that in an earlier video. But nevertheless, if I were to load this gun, I'm gonna notice that I'm feeding off the left side for me. For you viewers, it might look opposite. I'm gonna insert the magazine via push-pull, drop bolt, pull this magazine back out, and now I'm feeding on the right. Well, where did the bullet magically go? Well, it went into the chamber area, okay? Now what I could do as an added benefit to this particular technique is I can add in, I'm looking on, now of course it's feeding on the right, and then I visually watch it as I drop the bolt. That's what I like to do. I like to watch it visually go into the chamber. I can still pull the magazine out, now I'm feeding on the left, and then insert again via push-pull, and making sure that it's properly seated. Once this magazine starts coming in and out of the gun in an admin roll or tack reload or whatever it is, we always got to verify via a push-pull. That is extremely important. We know after I load a gun, of course, let's just say I do it with the bolt in a forward position. Again, I want to push pull. And then of course, I'm visually going to left this one chamber. And then I can also do a visual press check C-brass, drive the bolt group forward and hit my forward assist if need be. I've really never needed to hit this thing. For me, it doesn't even need to be on my gun. But with that said, that would just be a visual way to do a press check. And not only that, but make sure that you have one in the chamber and of course your mag seated. I always want to verify I have one in the chamber. That's my biggest thing. And that allows you to realize whether or not you've got a failure to feed issue, because if you don't have one in the chamber, then your magazine wasn't seated and your bolt just went over the magazine. For those that were in the military, SOP was as soon as the gun goes click, we slap the bottom of the magazine, we go to pull back on a charging handle, we observe, we release, we tap, and then of course we end up shooting. So that's known as sports. It still works real well today. Slap, pull, observe one going into the chamber, release, tap, and shoot. Between sports and what we would know on the pistol as tap, rack, bang, we word it a little bit differently on the M4. We start off with, as soon as we get that click, we push pull, we roll the gun, rack and observe at the exact same time, then come back up on target in order to shoot. I don't mess around with the forward assist. I've shot millions of rounds out of the M4 platform, and I have never once touched the side of that thing right there. So I'm gonna try to trim the fat as best as possible. Now, so that's more of a hybrid between the two techniques. Couple things to note that I'm just with my experience of me telling you this and figure it out for yourself. But I see a lot of guys try to rack the gun from this position right here. Couple things that happen. Normally you don't get a full stroke on a charging handle, and then you short stroke the gun, causing double feed. 2, a lot of times your sling's in a way, which of course causes that issue. 3, the ergonomics of your wrist bind, and it's not easy to cycle the gun. With that said, if my gun's in this position, I'm not doing what? Rolling the gun over and observing. And I want to observe as I cycle the gun, and when I roll it back over, it's easier for me to get a full pull on that charging handle. But again, that's just my opinion.